The first duty of government is to protect our rights.
It's our job to maintain the proper role of government in what we were tasked to do.
Obviously, we over budgeted last year. I hate to say that I was right, but I was right. So.
And I think that that's what we need to look at more, is trying to get back to what we used to be, where our churches and our families took care of each other instead of relying on the state.
And we have no way to maintain control over the spending of this program, and it will be a disaster for this state long term.
But we have a whole gamut of kids whose parents would like to do something for them and they cannot.
I take our constitutional rights, the constitutional rights of my constituents, very seriously.
This is simply about putting it out of reach of young, innocent, vulnerable children and making our libraries and schools a safe place for them to go.
And I am increasingly frustrated that we cannot stop ourselves from drinking at the public trough.
He's sounding the alarm. He's saying if we don't address these issues, we potentially might have greater problems moving forward.
Mr. Speaker, no matter how you look at it, no matter how you boil this down, there is never any time that a parent's right to govern what their children see and what they're exposed to should ever be bypassed.
If I was looking at a business and I was looking at these figures, there would be heads rolling because this is unsustainable.
We're supposed to be bottom-up government. We're supposed to be representing my citizens' ideas and your citizens' ideas, and we're supposed to be discussing them and debating them to come to a conclusion.
We need to start making Idaho first. We need to start making America first.
We need to be protecting our First Amendment rights, not inventing ways to slowly chip away at them.
Some people get hung up on the term reasonable steps. It is
and our
important
freedom
to note
freedom
that
of religion, freedom of speech
and interpreted by
are our first liberties.
It is necessary.
They are so important.
Means what
we don't have to rest without them.
In certain circumstances. For example, if there is one locker room, the men can use it for their game, and the women could use it to play the next game. The bill allows for the college or university to designate the locker room for the men during their game, then redesignate the locker room for the women during their game. Under this bill, a public higher educational facility must provide a reasonable accommodation for a student or employee who is unwilling to use the multi-occupancy facility designed for their sex. This did not seem like a stretch, as many of these facilities either have a single person facility or access to a multi-occupancy facility once all other individuals had exited the space. Finally, there is a cause of action because women who have their right to privacy and safety violated deserve to have a remedy when real harm is done. However, for this legal remedy to be accessible, one of the two things must occur as a person using a restroom or changing room designated for their sex. Either a facility gave someone of the opposite sex permission to use the occupancy space, or the facility failed to take reasonable steps, such as adopting a policy or enforcing safety standards, to provide privacy from the opposite sex in that space. Other states that have passed these laws, such as Florida and Tennessee, have not seen a mass amount of litigation filed. Idaho's courts are quite adept at kicking out frivolous lawsuits. It is actually quite the opposite. As a preventative bill, this law provides framework for these facilities to avoid litigation. 13 states have laws on the books like this one. Again, this week, the Ninth Circuit Court upheld our own Idaho law, Senate Bill 1100, protecting girls and women in their most vulnerable spaces in our K through 12 schools. With that, debate is open.
Is there further debate?
Mr. President, to debate against the bill.
Senator Rutke, you have the floor.
Mr. President, I'm going to vote against this bill. I mean, they're
Well, hello everybody. Matt Edwards here. Idaho Signal is live on the air, and I am in front of the Capitol building. You just saw. We can bring up Senator Ruckey up there along the side if we'd like, but I don't know. He's at a losing position right now. As you know, the Ninth Circuit of Court overturned the case dealing with privacy in bathrooms in high schools, so that's just going to extend everywhere. So this bill, I expect to be signed into law, and it'll try to get challenged, but probably not. But folks, I am here in Boise. I told you earlier this week that I'd be traveling, or last week that I'd be traveling down here, so I'll be down here this week. We're just going to continue to monitor these bills on the House floor and keep you up to speed as much as we can. One of the big breaking news things we want to share with you right now, though, is that we need to ask Governor Little to sign the Idaho Medical Freedom Act. You can call his office directly, or you can sign our petition. If you go to s1023.idahopetitions.com, sign your name to that petition, and we will have those petitions sent over to him ASAP. He has until Saturday to sign this bill. This is the Idaho Medical Freedom Act. If you want to give a call, it's 208-334-2100. Get on the phone now or head over to s1023.idahopetitions.com and get your name. The more people that sign, this is what we're saying, the more people that sign, the more likelihood he will sign. So we need to get this done right now. The other breaking news story that just hit this morning was the fact that apparently, allegedly, I'm going to use all the legal phrases, Representative Stephanie Jo Mickelson's farm, her business, was raided by ICE, and they picked up a criminal illegal alien with a violent history. Folks, this is what we've all been talking about. This is what we've been all afraid of. And we keep hearing that this isn't happening here in Idaho, but it absolutely is happening. And ICE has picked up this person, and that there's no telling how many more folks like this are out there that we need to be vigilant on. We'll be publishing an article later today, maybe moments from now, that goes into this. But a big shout out to an activist out here in Ada County, where I am right now, Ryan Spoon, for being the one to tip off ICE to the fact that there might be some criminal aliens being what's the term, housed or no, what's the term? I don't know, when you aid and abet somebody. That being said, it's a developing story, so we're going to continue on that. So yes, folks, those are the two things that are going on out here. It's a beautiful day here at the Capitol. I'm so pleased to be down here. So please ask Governor Little to sign the Idaho Medical Freedom Act. Call that number, head over to that website, sign the petition, and then look out for the article on this explosive criminal illegal immigration story with a guy who has a violent record. It's incredible what's going on. So stay tuned for that. All right, folks, we're going to go back to the Senate and the House floor, and we'll check in with you a little bit later. If not, we'll see you next time. Take care, everybody.
This would even be an issue. I think I would have laughed out loud, as they say. It's wild that we even have to debate this. I think. The first question in my mind is, why would a man want to be in a women's changing room or dressing room, things like that? It's just wild that the place we've got to as a culture. And, we just heard that we're chasing down these culture war issues. I don't believe we're chasing them down. I think bills like this, we're actually pushing back. I think it's defense, not offense, saying that we don't want women, or I'm sorry, we don't want men in women's spaces. I think it was, several weeks ago, I got to go to an event and Riley Gaines was speaking there. And she talked about how as a 17-year-old girl, they were forced to share a dressing room with a biological male without any warning. Nobody told them. They just showed up and they were changing. And I think most people in here have heard that story. And the part that stuck with me after hearing her speak, and I know she's been out to the state of Idaho and all that, but the part that really stuck with me was she emphasized we were high school, we were 17 years old, and there's this naked man in our dressing room. This bill pushes back against things like that. You know, women are getting raped in prisons by putting biological men in women's prisons. So I think there are exceptions here. Well, there are exceptions here on page 2 that talk about, you know, hey, if you need to, I think it covers most kind of normal everyday things, but this bill isn't talking about the fringe things or the what if this or the what if that. This bill is addressing, the intent of this bill is I think pretty evident and clear, and it's a common sense bill that we should all be voting for, Mr. President. So I'm happy to stand in support of this.
Is there further debate?
Mr. President.
Senator Nichols.
Thank you, Mr. President, to debate in favor of the bill. Thank you, Mr. President. I won't add a whole lot. Mainly, I just want to say that this is about protecting women. And if women were not getting pushed against from biological men trying to invade our spaces, then we wouldn't have to be having these discussions. But that is the era which we live in. And so we have bills now that are being ran in all sorts of states to be able to stand and protect women so that they can feel safe within the spaces that are designated for them. What I really like about this piece of legislation is that it clearly gives definitions in regards to covered entities and correctional facilities and the very places in which we are finding these problems occurring. So I think this bill is a reasonable bill. I think it does what we need it to do. And all we are doing is following the pattern that has been already set for Idaho by previous legislation that this legislature passed in 2023. It's being upheld by the courts, and even the gentleman on the second floor has stood in favor of these types of pieces of legislation and support. And our president is discussing and has discussed this issue in depth and continues to do so. So this is about protecting girls and women. And we're hearing lots of arguments on why we can't do this, but this is what part of our job is. And so I'm supporting this legislation. Thank you.
Is there further debate?
Mr. President, to debate the bill.
You have the floor, Senator Adams.
Thank you, Mr. President. And thank you to the senator from District 7 for bringing this legislation forward. It does look familiar, and that's because it's crafted the exact same way. But I'm hearing the same arguments as well against this legislation, and I have heard the same arguments that were used in the opposition to Senate Bill 1100. Local control. I heard, why don't we just let our local school districts resolve this issue? And now we're hearing, why don't we let our universities? This is not poorly written legislation. Page 3 specifically speaks to the issue of dorm rooms, and it says that a woman cannot be required to share a dorm room with someone of the other biological sex. That doesn't sound like consensual relationships in a college environment to me. And so I have a deep appreciation for folks that are in this legislature. We all have many ranging opinions, and the senator from District 29 is a phenomenal attorney. But I disagree with him strongly that this is poorly written, and the Ninth Circuit Court disagreed as well by upholding the previous legislation. So with that, Mr. President, I will be supporting this legislation.
Is there further debate?
Mr. President.
Senator Shippey.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I really appreciate the senator from 7 bringing this legislation. It's been mentioned in other places and here today as well that a certain community is continually being attacked or oppressed. I want to remind us that there is only male and female. This is something that has been understood for thousands of years. This is attested to in the Word of God and in the light of nature around us. So to me, this is a really simple issue. This is a good piece of legislation. Men should be treated like men, boys should be treated like boys. And if no men in this room or any other men are allowed to go into a women's restroom or women's dressing room, why would some create some sort of carve out? If there's only male and female, there is no third group. There's only male and female. So I think this legislation is in order because some have not affirmed that in their practices or policies. So in order to protect and guard the women of Idaho and the girls of Idaho, I think this legislation is in order. I have a wife, I have sisters, I have a mother, I have daughters. I hope to have granddaughters someday, and they need to be protected. I'm very supportive of this legislation. I urge you to vote aye as well. Thank you, Mr. President.
Is there further debate?
Mr. President.
Senator Winthrop.
Mr. President, would the senator from 7 yield to a question?
Senator Carlson, will you yield to a question?
Yes, I will.
The senator yields.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator from 7, I appreciate it. How does one tell if you're using the right bathroom? For example, I know a lot of people who look pretty androgynous. That means you can't identify male or female hegemonic standards of beauty or masculinity. In fact, I know a lot of high school kids that way. And so if a high school kid's going into the bathroom and you just can't tell, or maybe they're falsely accused, what happens?
Senator Carlson.
Thank you. So just like we use our badges here in the Senate, we are identified by our badge. We get into rooms and with our badges. So this is already being done with the enforcement of Senate Bill 1100. And so there's not going to be body checks. If someone might be using the wrong restroom, it might be identified by someone in the institution that works there that might say, hey, you might be in the wrong space. They're not going to give them a body check. This is not what this bill is about. This bill is about protecting women in their spaces.
Mr. President, would the senator yield for just one more question?
No.
Yes, and I'll caution all senators that the questions need to be contained within the 4 corners of the bill, not conjecture. We may have bumped that line in the last question. In my opinion, Senator Carlson, will you yield to another question?
No, thank you.
The senator yields or does not yield.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President, to debate against the
You
bill.
have the floor, Senator.
Number 1.
You have more latitude now.
Yes, thank you. The reason I asked that last question is because I was trying to figure out in the remedies section, because it does appear that somebody could falsely accuse somebody and then carry out the actions of the bill. It says civil actions brought pursuant to this section must be initiated within 2 years after violation occurred. So 2 years after, I believe, somebody of the wrong sex went into a bathroom, I have the ability to bring an action. I mean, that to me seems wild. And because I do think I bring a legitimate concern, is not everybody meets a hegemonic standard of male or female beauty. And it's hard to tell sometimes if somebody is a man or a woman. And that, therefore, the purpose of the bill is stated to protect women, but now you're potentially opening the door to harass because somebody just can't identify if you're woman enough. And I think that puts women in jeopardy, quite frankly. I've heard about the state's compelling interest. The state has a compelling interest to protect the rights of all people, regardless of their gender, regardless of their sex. And when I was doing a Google search of who's been beaten and harmed, it's trans women who are being harmed and beaten for using the right restroom designated to their biologic sex. And so who are we protecting? We should be protecting all people. Folks just want to go to the bathroom. I don't know about you. When I go to the bathroom, I go by the mirror, I check my hair, go do whatever I need to do. I come back, I check my hair one more time while I'm washing my hands, and I leave. I don't know what else is going on in these bathrooms, why we're so worried about it. But I think the state has a compelling interest to protect all people. I've heard that we can't believe it's an issue being discussed. Well, it's because we're making it an issue. We're making it an issue. There's no problem. We're the ones that are overreacting and making an issue. I've heard that, there's only a man and a woman, that trans people don't exist. Well, just because we say it doesn't mean that's not the case. There are people of all different genetic makeups, all different identities, and they exist. And just because we say they don't doesn't mean they go away. They still have to use the bathroom in peace. And then to hear about our president who wants to protect women, this is the man that used vulgarity about grabbing women you know where. I'm not saying it. Who has objectified them sexually, and this is the man we're upholding to say, oh, he's going to protect women?
Senator Wintrow.
Thank you, Mr. President. I didn't bring it up. But again, I think there are a lot of holes in this bill, but most importantly, I think the civil cause of action is a big grievance that we all should have, because people who you think will be protected may not be. And I think that is a travesty as well. Thank you, Mr. President.
Is there further debate? Hearing none, Senator Carlson, you're recognized to close the debate.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm just going to clear up a couple things. A person cannot be forced into sharing a dorm with the opposite sex. That's just to clear up one of the comments made. And this bill doesn't prevent, let me just read my notes real quick. It would not allow men to use the girls' restroom or shower while at the dorms. They would need to use the single user bathroom if they were inside the dorm. Cause of action is only when women are forced to share a sleeping space or a bathroom. That would be the example. I want to thank senators from District 18, 29, 10, 12, 9, and 19 for their debate. With that, I would just like to say that this bill is about protecting women's safety and dignity. This bill is a preventative bill. Thank you. I would encourage your aye vote. Thanks. Debate is closed.
Debate is closed. The question before the Senate is, shall House Bill number 264, as amended in the Senate, pass the Senate? The Secretary will call the roll.
Adams, Anthony, Berndt, Bierke, Blaylock, Burtenshaw, Carlson, Cook, Den Hartog, Foreman, Galloway, Grow, Guthrie, Harris, Hart, Kaiser, Cole, Blakey, Lenny, Lend, Nichols, Okonowitz, Ricks, Ruckte, Semmelroth, Shippey, Taylor, Taves, Van Orden, Ward Engelking.
Mr. President, 60 seconds.
You have 60 seconds to explain your vote under Senate rule.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I refuse to vote for any bill that has a private cause of action. I think these open up unnecessary litigation. And this one is especially egregious because it's 2 years after the violation. You can still bring a charge, and I think that's not right. I vote nay.
Senator Ward Ingle-King votes nay.
Wintrow, Wooler, Woodward, Zito, Seiderveld, Burtonshaw, Grow, Lenny,
The vote count shows 27 in favor with 6 against and 2 absent, a majority having voted in the affirmative. House Bill number 264, as amended in the Senate, has passed the Senate. Hearing no correction to title, the title is approved and the bill will be returned to the House of Representatives.
Mr. President.
Senator Den Hartog.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate return to the 5th order of business.
Without objection, the Senate will return to the 5th order of business. Presentation of petitions, resolutions, and memorials. We're at the 5th order.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate advance to the 6th order of business.
The Senate, without objection, will advance to the 6th order of business. Reports of standing committees. The Senate is at the 6th order of business.
Mr. President, I ask the Senate go at ease for any announcements or introductions.
Senate will be at ease.
Mr. President.
Senator Harris.
For an announcement.
You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senators, we were set to go into the 14th order of business this afternoon, but we're trying to accommodate some backlog of amendments, so we're going to postpone that until further notice. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President.
Senator Blaylock.
For an introduction.
You have the floor, Senator.
My mom is here today, and I'm just so pleased to have her here. Please welcome her to the Senate.
Gets a paycheck, but when she gets a paycheck, I check her account to make sure that it's really there, and I do that on my phone, and I look at that. We're looking at some investigators for the securities business. Their caseloads have gone up 36% since 2023, and we're seeing a huge increase in cybersecurity claims in this department. And frankly, the caseloads have become so much that they just can't handle all the cases that are coming toward them. And when that happens, they ask for more employees. And so they've asked for more people to help with cybersecurity. And currently, they don't have anybody in the department, excuse me, that handles cybersecurity. And so these people that they're looking at hiring will have cybersecurity experience and will be able to help those people. 99% of the fund sources come from, let me back up. They're also asking for a forensic accountant, and they currently don't have a forensic accountant. They would like to have one of those. They're currently seeing over $140 million exposure in forensic accounting for this person to review. So it'll be a big job. With that, I just wanted to mention that these have several fund sources. This agency actually has remitted $31 million back to the general fund. They collect the fees from stockbrokers, from banks, and if they have extra money, they revert that back to the general fund. With that, I just want to mention one more thing, if I could. The circumstances really have changed on this budget, but over $38 million in Idaho was absconded in 2023 by cybersecurity claims. And so that's one of the reasons they're looking really hard at helping with this. Claims have gone from $300,000 in 2021 to $15 million in cyber currency fraud. I know that many of you have taken a pledge to do 1.2%, and this budget has a higher than that. The problem is, criminals don't track inflation rates. And they don't care. We've had a 36% increase in in the criminal part of this. You know, criminals just don't care. They don't track inflation. They just keep stealing money. This budget is about helping Idahoans not lose their money. I'd hope you'd give this a green light. I can tell you we've worked really hard to trim this budget down. It's a good budget now. Appreciate your green light.
First motion, first day on motion. Gentleman from 30.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just to declare Rule 80, this department directly regulates my firm.
Declaration shall be noted. Gentleman 31. Declaration shall be noted. Gentleman 25.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Debate the bill.
On that floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yeah, $642,000. That's a lot of money, especially when we're all hungry. And I'd say that's pretty expensive lunch. But you know, with 4 full-time employees, I mean, that's just another growth of government. What I find interesting is I've heard many times in this body, how do you eat an elephant? Everybody says 1 bite at a time. Well, the same thing can be said about what we've been doing with government. How do you fill up a balloon? You do it 1 breath at a time. And you keep on doing it until that balloon gets too big, beyond the capacity, and that's when it pops. That's when the suffering comes. And with that, I won't be voting for this.
Order the debate on the motion. Gentleman from 11.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To debate the bill.
Has the floor.
You know, a few minutes ago, I told you that the 3 FTPs was too much money. This one has 4 new FTPs at a cost of $590,200. It's quite a raise. It's 5.7% above the maintenance budget. We've already funded this department, and we've given them growth for CEC, et cetera. We need to vote no on this.
Order the debate on the motion. Lave 34.
To debate the bill.
They has the floor.
I appreciate the concern as it relates to growing government, but don't we have an obligation to our constituents to ensure that they're actually being protected? And not protected like in the paternal sense, but protected in the sense that when we have an obligation to them, in this sense, when it comes to their finances, that we provide the necessary tools to ensure that their assets are safe, that their money is sitting in banks that are being audited and reviewed as needed to ensure that those assets are protected. People work hard. We should be doing our part to ensure that the banks that they are working with are protecting their finances. These requests are not about growing the size of government. They're about addressing the reality that the threat has changed. The bank robbers aren't coming in through the front doors. They're coming in through the internet. The ability for someone to come in and potentially remove funds from individuals' accounts is literally a life and death situation for some of these individuals who end up through scams and through other means losing all of their life savings, potentially losing access to any financial security that they have built up over the years. The Department of Finance is the body that exists in state law for the purposes of ensuring that banks are taking the necessary steps to fulfill their legal obligations as passed into law to protect the finances of Idahoans. We've had debates in this body all session long about the concerns about growing government. I would like for government to do the thing that we have asked it to do, which in this instance is secure Idahoans' finances. I ask for your green light.
Further debate on the motion. Gentleman 24.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To debate in favor.
Gentleman has the floor.
Somewhere along the line here, we need to talk about what it takes to run government. And I do understand the passion to reduce spending, but I don't understand raising that passion above what it takes for government to function properly. If we're going to be an equal member in government, one of our functions is to govern. a lot of these things that we're looking at are statutory requirements. I apologize for the time, Mr. Speaker, but I just feel like we got to talk about some of this stuff. When Otter was governor, we had a severe downturn. And one of the things that he did that I thought was great is he had every agency go back and look at the statutory requirements, zero-based budgeting, zero-based funding. Look at the statutory requirements of every government agency, every committee, every board, every commission, and figure out what it took, how much money it took to provide those services. That's a baseline. That's one of the things that we've talked about in JFAC. We've been short on analysts to help us do it. But we need to take every one of these budgets and take it back to that zero-based accounting. See what the statute calls for, see what is required to do that, how many people, how this all works. We have to provide the cybersecurity. Does it make sense to leave cybersecurity shorthanded to allow people to commit fraud? Is that logical? Is it logical? Would you do it in your business? Would you do it in your home? Part of this money, I'm going to talk about the aged because I know something about that. When you hit about 65 or 70, that's when you really become a target for scams, really for fraud. And they're really good. And I imagine there's a lot of you guys don't get those phone calls or don't get those emails. But I get stuff, I'll get 30 phone calls a day. There's no way to block them. 30, 35 phone calls a day. It'll be about Medicaid or Medicare or an outstanding bill that I haven't paid. And if I don't pay it, I'm going to get collected. If I don't do something about my home, I'm going to lose my home. Now that may sound silly to some of you guys. I understand that you probably don't get that, don't see it. Some of you have been scammed online. But particularly for this population, as they get to that age, they're hit with everything and it's hard for them to discern. It's hard for them to understand. And if we can get people in place that can chase this down and get some of that back, I think it's irresponsible not to do it. I really do. We need to help people we can help. We need to govern. We need to govern. We have a responsibility to govern. That's what you got elected for. It's what we took an oath for. Ask for your green light.
For debate on motion, gentleman 26.
Mr. Speaker, to debate briefly, please. I'm hungry too. Okay. To beat on one side of a balance sheet, the expenditures, if you run a business, you also have to look at the income side of it. What we haven't talked about here is source of funds. These are dedicated funds. They're coming from the industry that's being regulated. To my view, cut off our nose to spite our face. On the income side, clearly there's a few more dollars moving within our economy, and there's a whole lot of different avenues that it's moving through it. To sit here and worry so much about the expenditure side and move the perspective that this is what one of our businesses, frankly, are generating. I hate to overplay capitalism, but if we don't take care of our income stream, basically the dedicated funds that are coming to us and we're appropriating here, it's just simply not looking at both sides of the business. We need to protect the income stream, not just our citizens, but to protect the basic foundation, really, of our financial institutions, and that's to mind our money. So not simply the cost side, but frankly, the income side. This should have a green light.
For debate on motion, Lady 32.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To debate in favor of the bill.
Lady has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This body funds the Internet Crimes Against Children unit at the Attorney General's office. You didn't see a budget come up this year because they only asked for a maintenance budget. In that unit, there is more crime than they can fight. This is a similar situation. I know it says Department of Finance on the bill, but really this is about going after criminals. In JFAC, we were persuaded due to the levels of attacks and the amount of money being stolen, that they needed 5 to properly combat and shut down some of that. You told us otherwise, so we're coming back with 4. We'll do it again if you make us. But we're doing it at the expense of Idahoans whose funding is at risk because we don't have the staff to go after the criminals. As the good lady from 34 said, they're not coming in the front door as much anymore. They're coming in through the internet, and that's what this budget will help stop. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
For debate on the motion, gentleman from 11.
To debate.
Gentleman has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I really do appreciate the input of everybody in here, everybody that sees both sides of the argument. The issue that I would like to just touch on briefly, the 1.2% increase that several of us have taken the pledge to uphold is what has been calculated in for inflationary growth year upon year, with the understanding that next year's maintenance budget is going to be the sum of this year's maintenance and enhancement. You know, if we go back and we look at the growth of the state over the past 5 or 6 years, you know, latest figure was 55%. 55% growth in 5 years is it's not insignificant, right? And how long does that trend of growth continue? And I would argue that the growth is not proportional to the growth of the state, either in the population or the industry that's coming in here. And the issue that I guess I'm just really having a lot of heartburn with when I'm looking at these enhancement budgets, and there are a few of these enhancement budgets that fall within the category of what we will support. You know, if there's not increased full-time positions, if there's not money coming from the federal government, if there's not a growth, a percentage-wise over 1.2%, we'll vote on those enhancement budgets. But when we look at some of these enhancements that are anywhere from like 5%, 9%, 30%, or somewhere above or below any of those numbers, the question I keep asking myself, and I would, with all due respect, ask every member of this body is, are the people who are paying out of their taxes to fund these programs, have they gotten a raise of any of those numbers? Have they gotten a 5%, a 30% raise? And I would say by and large, no, they haven't. So where do we keep funding this growth from year upon year, especially coming through a time of, again, very historic inflation where the average everyday citizen is struggling to pay bills, they're struggling to pay rent and put food on their table and feed their children and pay for everything else. And so I feel for those people. And I hope that as a legislative body, while yes, we do have the responsibility to fund government, I would just ask that we consider the people who are providing this funding out of their tax dollars that is paid to the government, and that we not become so disconnected from the base that we represent that we forget that it is the hard work and the sweat of the taxpayers of the state to keep the lights on here, and just to be mindful of that. And I appreciate everybody's input once again, but I will have to be a red light on this bill. Thank you.
Further debate on the motion. Jump 23.
Mr. Speaker, I just need to declare Rule 80, they actually issue my banking license.
Thank you, gentlemen. Your declaration will be noted in the journal. Hearing none, with the gentleman 31 care to close the debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the debate. It's been really good. I might just remind the body of a few things. I appreciate the 1.2%, whatever, however you came up with that number, that's fine. It's a statewide growth in inflation. We've had a 6% increase in population. That's, if you add that up, that's a 7.2% inflation plus growth. This budget's 5.7. It's interesting. In 2023, we had 1,757 cyber claims in Idaho, according to the FBI. Those are the ones they tracked. Over 500 of those were from age 60 and greater. So they are preying on the older. And I hate to admit this, but I got scammed last year. And I think I'm pretty savvy. I think I'm pretty technically savvy. I think I know my stuff. I think I can read an invoice. I got an invoice from a company, a computer company that I buy my computers from. It looked legit. It was $410. I paid it. And then I got thinking I didn't receive anything from that company that said I paid it. So I called around, went to Jakarta. Now you might think that's funny. I didn't think it was funny. I got scammed. That's what this is all about. It's $410. Can I afford it? Yeah, maybe. I didn't like it. I was pretty upset about it. My wife teases me about it. I don't like that. But we need these people to stop this. And I'm telling you, I think I know what I'm doing. My mother-in-law, my mother, they would have paid that bill too. Let's green light this. Let's get this cybersecurity under control, and let's see if we can save a few pesos. Thank you.
Thank you, good gentlemen. Debate is closed. Question is, House Bill 448 pass the House. Clerk will unlock the machine. Members will cast their votes. Has every member voted? Does any member change their vote? Clerk will lock machine, record the roll. 43 aye, or read the pairs.
Matthias votes aye. Tanner, 14, votes nay.
43 ayes, 26 nay, 1 absent excused. Majority have voted in favor of House Bill 448. House Bill 448 is passed the House. Correction title.
No correction to title.
Hearing none, the title approved bill be transferred to the Senate. Without objection, the House will now
And that's exactly what happened. You want to pull the tape? You can pull the tape because we now got video.
Man, I sure do love paying my taxes. If anyone happens to be listening, yep, taxes all the time, and I encourage my friends to pay their taxes too. Our government is awesome. 9/11 definitely wasn't an inside job. I mean, that would be crazy. And personally, I don't do crazy. Hey, I don't need to see the president's birth certificate, not my jurisdiction. And guess what? If they say something is safe and effective, it's safe and effective. Listen, I hang my Ukraine flag one nail at a time, just like everybody else. I think we need to send them all the money that they need. Keep printing it, keep it coming. I'm not one of those conspiracy theorists that you hear about. They can really get stuck on an idea, but me, you just tell me what to think, I'll go with it. Nope, you won't see me burying gold in the backyard. That's dishonest. I wouldn't do that to you guys. And I register all my guns. I stayed home during COVID, and I called in any of my neighbors who weren't, because it seemed like the right thing to do. I love how they classify documents, how the FBI does that, how they just keep them locked away. No one needs to know. Why would I need to know? And I just can't believe all those MAGA extremists who tried to overthrow the Capitol. Crazy. That's totally the kind of thing they would do. There was nothing weird about that day. I was watching the news, and I totally believed it. Yep. I don't ask a lot of questions. So I watch the sky every day, right?
Okay,
and I've been noticing these anomalies. Did y'all know the identity of the shooter? Also, how was he allowed to get on the roof?
Hey everybody, we're back inside the Capitol right now. Some pretty heavy action on both the Senate and the House floor there. And it's pretty good to be walking around the Capitol here, seeing some good friends, some good viewers of the show as well. So that's really great. Folks, just a reminder, call Governor Little, ask him to sign the Idaho Medical Freedom Act, 208-334-2100. We'll see you next time. Take care.
Bill, I think it puts a stake in the ground that says we have a sovereign right to protect what's ours.